Coming in at number 9, we have what happens when you Google Slenderman. Basically, Huns, don't Google Slenderman, or if you do, maybe just have a quick browse of the Google images and a good little laugh and move on with your life. Don't you research him too hard, as you may not like what you find. One 16-year-old wrote a story about how they started dreaming about Slenderman after looking him up to scare their friend. They had heard the warnings about not looking too deeply into Slenderman, but they all thought it was nonsense. They said after researching him that they loved the story, but they had a very uneasy feeling. It seems the uneasy feeling led to an uneasy night's sleep. The teenager's parents said that they had been sleep talking for hours in the night. On another evening, he felt watched as he went to sleep. He then had a very vivid dream. He drew what he saw in his sleep, and this was the drawing. Creepy. He also said that following the dream, he drew an operator symbol and taped it to his door, and since then, he hasn't had any more dreams. However, he has had a perpetual stuffy nose and sometimes gets fierce headaches. He also says that his phone shuts off unexpectedly. Is he being haunted by Slenderman? Coming in at number 8, Slenderman is Voldemort. What? The world of Harry Potter and internet creepypastas are colliding here. An 18-year-old girl wrote about her experience spotting Slenderman or Voldemort when she was 15 in Oklahoma City. She said her and her friend were out getting snacks from the 7-Eleven and they spotted a very tall, thin, extremely pale figure in the park. Her and her friend kept referring to the figure that they had seen as Voldemort. They talked about it for years, convinced that they'd seen the Dark Lord. Was he lost and recruiting Death Eaters all the way over in Oklahoma? I don't know. 2 years later, they came across the legend of Slenderman and immediately put 2 and 2 together. Perhaps they hadn't seen He Who Must Not Be Named, but actually they'd seen something just as horrifying. Coming into number 7, we have the urban legend of the Stickman. One teenager recalled dreaming of Slenderman when they were kindergarten age. They said they went to bed and had a dream of a long, narrow corridor with only light coming from the end. They walked down the corridor into a bright white room. Now when they turned back to get out of the unsettlingly light room, they saw a tall, slender man in a suit silhouetted in the hall. As they got closer, they noticed that the man was wearing a red tie. As they got even closer, they noticed how gigantically tall he was. As they then got closer still, they noticed that the man had no face. The kids screamed and screamed and screamed until they woke up. They noticed that the clock was 12:57 and that their dad was next to the bed looking worried. When their father asked if they were okay, the kid calmly replied, "Tall stick man." Scary. My one gripe with this story is, can many 4-year-olds read the time? I don't know. Coming into number 6, we have the origin of Slenderman. Okay, so we've talked a lot about what a death-bringing creep Slenderman is, but where did he actually come from? I may actually have an origin story for you here. On a website called Play With Death, I found a story about where old Slens may have come from. They say that he was once an American man who was tortured to death. First he was beaten with a log, totally battering his face. Then he was impaled with a 2-foot spike to a tree. They say that his arms and legs were pulled out of their sockets and stretched out and out and out and out again. He died a slow, painful death, and he came back to haunt wooded areas as a new type of long, tortured ghoul who wants to get revenge by people in similar ways. Coming into number 4, we have the Gravity Falls abduction. According to urban legend, Slenderman is making his way into mainstream media in order to brainwash vulnerable kids and teens. He has been spotted in the background of a number of shows. In 2012, eagle-eyed viewers spotted Slenderman in an episode of Disney's Gravity Falls. This scary bringer of death can be spotted in the background of an episode. Dipper and Mabel are in the woods, obviously, and Slenderman can be seen lurking behind them. He also apparently pops up in Dragon Ball Z and My Little Pony. Coming into number 3, we have the 2007 investigation. According to Slenderman stories out there, an investigation team discovered 22 bodies in the woods. The dead were said to be mainly children and teenagers. Now the discovery became known as the Steinman Woods Massacre, and the incident was hushed up. According to the legend, the incident was reported by the organization. The organization are supposed to be like a special ops team that track Slenderman and try and contain contain him. The report reads, investigation team discovered 22 bodies of both genders and various ages impaled on broken tree branches in a radiating circle pattern with chest mutilations, as often noted with Slenderman. Upon confirmation, lead investigator called for an immediate evacuation of the investigation team at 1700 hours. Bodies first discovered at 1100 hours. Deadline for safe evacuation of team with only viewed physical evidence of Slenderman approximately 1730. Now unfortunately, they lost contact with their team at 1725. A second investigation team then reportedly recovered a camera equipment a week later. I don't know what happened from there, it's all very hushed up. This is all we know about the Steinman Woods massacre. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the German tale of der GroBmann. It seems that there are a number of different legends of a menacing Slenderman, not just in America. Slenderman might not actually be an urban legend at all. Instead, he may be an old legend dating back to the 1700s in Germany. It seems that in Eastern Europe, talk of a tall ghost slim man has been circulating since the 16th century. In Germany and Romania, they call him der GroBmann, which translates to the tall man. He was said to be a fairy who lived in the Black Forest, which is in southwest Germany. Now the Black Forest has been the center point of many fairy tales, especially from the Brothers Grimm, so suffice to say, it is a spooky place. In the German tale, the tall, slim man would chase bad children who snuck into the woods at night. A journal entry from 1702 seems to coincide with the legend of der GroBmann. Translated from German, it reads, "My child, my Lars, he's gone, taken from his bed. The only thing that we found was a scrap of black clothing. It feels like cotton, but it's softer, thicker. Lars came into my bedroom yesterday screaming at the top of his lungs that the angel was outside. I asked him what he was talking about, and he told me some nonsense fairy story about der GroBmann. He said he went into the groves by our village and found one of my cows dead hanging from a tree. I thought nothing of it at first, but now he's gone. We must find Lars and my family must leave before we're all killed. I'm sorry, my son. I should have listened. May God forgive me." We have a horrible tale at number 10. We have dead rats on the wall. This story is so messed up. This whole saga was posted on Reddit No Sleep a few years ago by Redditor Moonbay. She went away with her husband to her grandpa's cabin, and on their way up to the country, her husband cracked his classic Slenderman joke. Sure, don't we all love a Slenderman joke? I mean, I guess, until things get scary and then it's categorically not funny. When they got to the cabin, the girl saw scratch marks on one of the sides. Now, it was kind of like someone had dragged a rake across the side of the house. She made a note to tell her grandpa, but assumed it must have been animals. That night she heard something outside, once again like a scratching. Her husband joked again that it was Slenderman, but then said seriously it must be rats, and in the morning he would set up some kind of pest control. It turns out it was indeed rats. Rats nailed to the cabin wall anyway. The husband was a bit concerned, but thinks it was just kids playing a prank. Now this would have been when I got the F out of there. The next night there is scratching noises and heavy breathing and growling coming from outside the cabin, and the pair both agree to leave at first light. Now in the morning they step out to a whole menagerie of dead woodland animals strewn around the property. Gross. Not only that, goodbye and thanks for playing is written in blood on the wall. Was it Slenderman or some other woodland killer? He comes through the Xbox at number 8. Something weird happened with an Xbox 5 years ago in Ohio, and then somebody posted to Reddit about their experience in a new house. My bud Da Vinci wrote that their new home had been the location of a murder and a previous reported Slenderman sighting. When this guy's parents were out one evening, he was playing video games online with some friends. Everything was totally fine until he got a text and he put his controller down to read it. When he went to pick up his controller, he noticed that his game character appeared to morph into Slenderman and then stare at him through the screen. Then he said the character started to move in the screen, and then it seemed as if it was going to come out. Now this was when the guy woke up, thank goodness. He saw his clock which said it was 4 AM and he thought, whoa, that's really weird, he must have been asleep at his computer for almost 2 hours. He then noticed that his bedroom door and window were open. Now he was a bit freaked out and he closed them and went to check on his dog. When he came back into the room, he noticed the clock again. It was 2:16 AM. Weird, he thought it was 4 AM and 2:16 was the time he last remembered playing his game. What was going on? Coming into number 7, we have the Slenderman tape. Sometimes Slenderman will come for you, and in those times you need to just get out of there. Get out of there exactly is what this one Redditor did when Slendy came for him. Scissor of Venus wrote that in their old hood they saw Slenderman. Tall, slender, black, no face, creepy, sure. After seeing him a few times, he decided, you know what, I'm done with this neighborhood, I'm gonna move. Good on him, Slender's a creep. When they were at a new home, a village by a mountain, the guy's wife saw something weird in the mountain whilst hiking. Later, the guy found a tape in a drawer that was seemingly an interview with a child called Jimmy. The kid seemed scared about something, and the tape turned into screaming that, I quote, he said, he's here. This Jimmy kid seemed to totally lose it. He then seemed to hallucinate, and the guy listening to the tape also had a hallucination of his very own. He dreamed that Slenderman came to him with his tentacles and that he actually hid his wife and a kid in a mountain cave. He then woke up to hear the kid in the tape screaming. Meet the only group that might be able to stop Slenderman at number 6. We have the Optic Nerve. Optic Nerve are also known as the Organization, the Bureau, and the Anti-S-Walker Unit. This is the legendary group that observes and tracks Slenderman. The Optic Nerve is highly secretive, but the urban legend goes that they're based in Washington and are a government organization, possibly a collaborative outfit between the USA and Germany. The ON is said to have been watching Slenderman for years, and they believe that he is harvesting organs for some kind of greater evil purpose. While the team tracks Slenderman, who they call the Toolman or S-Man, they don't yet know how to neutralize him. We have Slenderman in the fog at number 5. The person from this Reddit post was convinced that Slenderman was just a creepypasta until they encountered him on a foggy night. The sun was setting and it cast a weird bluish light over the fog. The narrator's dog seemed antsy and the cat seemed really weird too, although the pair didn't love each other. When the writer of the Reddit post went into the bathroom, they looked into the mirror and saw something reflected. It seemed that there was a long, tall figure outside looking around. They thought it was just a trick of the light, but when they went out to let the cat out, they noticed that there was a crouched figure by the trees in the garden. As they strained to get a look at what it was, their neighbors came home, lighting up the fog around them with their car headlights. Now the figure then seemed to disappear. What was it? We'll never know. The Canuck sightings are coming into number 4. In 2015, Slenderman rumors were rife as ever when not one but 4 people reported seeing the spooky figure in and around Canuck in the Midlands of Great Britain. Some swear the sightings were Slenderman, others were convinced it was the lost soul of a ghoul roaming around the old mining town. That being said, 3 of the 4 Slendy sightings were inside a house. Now one witness said that they woke up to see a sphere staring at them in the shadows of their room, and as they got up to investigate, the woman said, and I quote, "As I tried to get out of bed and investigate further, the shadow began to stretch towards the ceiling. It was at that point I found myself faced with the most disgusting and horrific creature imaginable. It was about 8 feet tall and had a white face with razor-sharp fangs." Another household reported that the Toolman had fierce red eyes and was wearing a black suit and a hat. The indoor sightings are being explained as the effects of sleep paralysis, but this is just too much of a weird coincidence. Another witness who reported seeing the man outside said that he wore a long black overcoat. What is going on in the middle of England? Coming into number 3, we have the Scottish and Irish folk legends of Fear Dúba. Fear Dúba is a Celtic legend about a dark man, the Black Man, I believe, if that is the most accurate translation. Fear Dúba is said to be a malevolent force that lives in the woods and wears all black. Sounds like someone we know. He's also said to have long, tentacly arms, which he's able to pass off as branches when he wants to be disguised. Now, by disguising himself as a tree, Fear Dúba is able to peep in the windows of children and tap on the glass with the branches. Speaking of branches, we have the legend of the Dutch Takkenman at number 2. Takkenman means branch man in Dutch, and the legend is strikingly similar to that of Slenderman, which leads me to think that the many Slenderman-like stories across the world might in some way be connected. We might not have the same name for the menace, but it is eerie how many different cultures have had a similar figure in their local lore. With Takkenman or branch man, he has legs that resemble thin tree trunks. He's very tall, blending into the woodland. Now with the American and English legend, it's more the arms that are long, but here it's the legs. Still though, it's thought that Takkenman shares some key similarities with the German legend of Langerman, long man. They're both creepy woodland dwellers that appear to show up in the background of seemingly normal pictures. Finally, at number 1, we have the legend of what actually happens to you before Slenderman gets you. We have Slender Sickness. Those stalked by Slenderman have been known to contract what the internet is calling Slender Sickness. This sickness presents itself in coughing and sneezing fits, then leads to coughing and vomiting blood. It's also characterized by extreme exhaustion, paranoia, nausea, fever, nosebleeds, and a lot of short-term memory loss. Not ideal. The Slender Wikia explains this sickness is sigma radiation, so basically radiation poisoning. This apparently is contracted by being too close to the slender chap. Apparently the illness gets worse the more you spot him. If you do have these symptoms in real life though, I think maybe do see a doctor and don't let old Slendy Wickier diagnose you.
Number 9. The Shadow Man. This first victim reports having been tormented by Slender Man his entire life and referred to him first as the Shadow Man. Many people who experience night terrors report seeing a tall, lanky shadow figure that torments them while in sleep paralysis. This guy first saw him when he was just 8 years old. While getting up to go to the washroom, they saw a tall, shadowy figure standing in the hallway. He reached out and beckoned to him with long, slender fingers. At some point, he worked up the courage to turn on the light, and the figure disappeared. 4 years later, it appeared again on his uncle's farm, standing in the highest window at the top of the building of the old barn, staring right at him. Then 2 years later after that, he appeared again, this time a lot closer. By this point, this person had developed sleep paralysis and it would happen fairly often. As they were about to drift off to sleep, there he stood at the end of his bed. They couldn't move or scream, and the figure just stood there watching him, waiting for something, until finally he burst up from the bed and Slender Man disappeared. But the sense that someone was watching him still remained and never went away. Number 8. Trampoline. I mentioned previously that Slender Man became a kind of internet meme contest, but just how Slender Man became such a prolific urban legend remains unknown. Perhaps it's because of innocent sightings like this that make a more sinister explanation arise. Check out this clip.
After a record, when he played the video, he saw something like a Slenderman seeing him from his bed.
I think what freaks me out about this video the most is how horror film-esque it is and how mundane. It was just a kid wanting to record his badass trampoline skills, but what he wouldn't have noticed while he was filming was the presence of something watching him. Considering the fanaticism around Slender Man, it is possible that predators could assume its identity to carry out evil deeds. I don't know, but I hope he's safe and that who or whatever that was never seen again. Number 7. 7-Eleven. Apparently Slender Man loves a good Slurpee. This next story comes from a young woman from Oklahoma City. She was 15 years old at the time when her and her friend made a typical visit to 7-Eleven. Next to the convenience store there was a park with all of these weird statues. It was around 12:30 a.m. and usually it's an uneventful walk, but this time they saw an extremely tall figure, as tall as the branches in the trees nearby. It was dressed in black and extremely pale, sounds like Slender Man. Attempting to show no fear in the face of potential danger, she shouted at the person to see if she'd get a response, but to no avail. It just stood there, staring at them. I hate that. Needless to say, they booked it and referred to the being as Voldemort because that's kind of what it looked like. But then, years later, her friend informed her of the tales of Slender Man, and after seeing a picture she realized that's exactly what it looked like. Imagine? No thank you. Number 6. A cemetery sighting. This next story predates the whole Slender Man launch as well. This Reddit user reports a story that happened in her hometown before Slender Man was even launched. Reports of kids seeing a tall man in a suit walking around was already the stuff of legend where she lived. Her friend's older sister was skateboarding home one night and she had to pass the cemetery. Of course, there's the cemetery. Of course there is. As she went by, she kept seeing tall shadows following her, and she initially just wrote it off as a weird reflection of the light, you know, as you would. But then when she got home, she saw a creepy looking old man wearing a black suit standing in her backyard. She ran inside and looked out the window, but he had moved. He was already across the street under the trees, again, still looking at her. Stories like this were pretty common in her neighborhood, but it wasn't until the Slender Man story actually launched in 2009 that people actually got really scared. If stories like this actually exist and remain to be true, then here's my question. Since the way he tortures his victims is through mental manipulation, who is to say that the image of Slender Man circulating is a result of the creature's own grand plan? Number 5. Alone in the forest. This next story comes from Zach, who lives in Texas. This one creeps me out because it reminds me of the stories kids at school used to tell about the forest behind my school. While Zach was growing up, there was a big patch of forest behind his house. He used to play there all the time, but one evening made him question ever going back. Something was off about that evening, and so he began looking around. Off in the distance he saw a figure just standing there. It was impossibly tall, dark, with a featureless face, but somehow he knew he was staring right at him. him. Like a smart lad, everything inside him told him to run, and so he did. Follow your instincts, kids, okay? He was about a 7-minute run to his backyard, so he started sprinting, but no matter how fast he ran or where he went, the creature was always the same distance behind him. When he finally made it to the other side, he turned around and saw the creature stopped. He never saw the creature again, but years later, he started hearing about Slenderman and knew that's what he had seen.